Nah, I haven't listened to this whole video, so I thought it was an interesting video. Um, I'll probably check in more of that, but I got to do some things, and I figure, well, what the heck? I'll just record it, maybe watch it later, or try to check back with these people again. Hopefully, this clears up when when the video proceeds forward. I'm not an attorney, so anything is said on here, and if I make any remarks, it's just opinion. Alright? So I never look straight forward, always look around me. Be able to protect myself by means of any means necessary. And that includes thinking outside the box, y'all. That's the reason why you look around. You're trying to think outside the box. Okay? This is just a learning video. Take it as you wish. Okie. Let's see what happens.
Okay, so from my perspective, God writes his law in your heart. And that's the stuff you know from the time that you're a child. You can't take somebody else's lollipop. You can't take their little toy car. You don't hit somebody for no reason. There's all these things that are kind of born with. And it's only as we grow up, and the more we deal in school through their education and things like that, we can TV and radio and music and all these different things we're just bombarded with. This whole different system, okay, that has been set up to rob us of the natural state of man. Man was created. Persons were invented. And it's really important to understand that. And, a lot of people, it's kind of funny, you'll hear people all the time saying, well, I want God to help me, or why doesn't God help me, or he failed me. And, sometimes I just kind of feel like there's this generic God out there that has 1,400 and 1,000 different faces and beliefs, and it's like, okay, I'm not taking away anybody's right to believe in that, but just from my perspective, if you don't really understand what law is and truth, because we're scattered, it's really hard to say that we can count on the Creator to help, because there's so much information that it's hard for him to get to a point where, like some people, it's like you talk to them, they don't get it. And they're like, well, what about this? And what about that? But this says this, and it's, something is preventing them. And some people say it's like, you're not being a man. You're not being a man. Well, and that's true. But what is the root of that? Like, we can just say you're not being a man and reprimand them, or we can say, well, here's why I think maybe you're having this struggle. So I'm just going to kind of paraphrase a lot and move kind of quick. But essentially what happened was there was this, I believe, I always mispronounce it, but it's Code of Hammurabi. It was created. It was a mercantile code. It was invented a long time ago by man. It's actually a pretty efficient code system. And what it was bringing the whole world of trade into one style or system or framework, okay? And, of course, that thing's been morphed over, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, into the Holy Roman Empire to Europe, and then back to the Vatican, to canon law, where it appears now as USC code and, the UCC code, and it kind of creeps up into there. I mean, they're literally using code that was from 500 BC still today. And, the United States is absolutely set up like a church. They have their own temples, which, you look at a courthouse, you go to the Lincoln Memorial, it's called a temple, and they set the presidents up as gods. You can go to the Capitol building, you can see George Washington depicted as a god, and then you have their priest called the judge, and you have the prosecutor or the cleric, you do a sentence or pay a penance, you serve your penance to whatever your conviction is. These are all religious terms. And a lot of people on this call or listening later are going to recognize, everybody's pretty familiar with a lot of the theories or teachings about the Vatican actually being the owner of the crown and how the crown crept in and everything. But they take this Babylonian code, and where it gets into the Bible, for those that are, kind of attuned to that, the Israelites were led into captivity after they were godless, right? They were starting to serve idols and statues, and they were bending their knee to statues. And they were warned by the prophet Jeremiah, hey, you guys are just, you're getting so far off base. We're going to be punished if you don't stop. Yeah, we're the chosen people. He's not going to do anything to us. Don't sweat it. Well, lo and behold, they kept on, and finally God got pissed. Off they go to Babylon. Now they're down in Babylon for 80 years. You know, that's quite a while. That's a couple generations of kids growing up who learn this code. So you have a whole, you know, people that bring this foreign code when they come back out of captivity into the Temple of Jerusalem, and now they incorporate this code into the temple worship. And this is where Jesus comes in and beats the money changers. Of course, that story is a little different than it's portrayed a lot in modern churches and in teachings. You know, he was literally the king of Israel at that moment. He had come in on the donkey, and they accepted him as the lawful king of Israel. And when he went into the money changers, that was in the far back where, you know, they would take the temple sacrificial coins and wealth of the temple, and then if they were acting up or embezzling money or not doing correctly, the king would whip them over the back of the neck and shoulders with this whip. So when he went in, he was literally showing who he was, because he couldn't have even been in there. And, you know, we talked about, I think it was last week or the week before, JC really wanted me to mention, woe unto you lawyers, in the book of Luke in chapter 11. They had brought this Babylonian system of statue worship, which we know today as statutes. And there's a YouTube channel called Just Conspiracy that has a wonderful video on that called Statue to Statutes, where it's just modern idol worship. You know, you have people really concerned about worshiping these statutes because they're afraid of getting in trouble, because the high priest of that church called the United States will punish them if they don't follow these statutes. So essentially they're trading the law of the Creator, which is don't bend your knee to another god, don't serve false idols, but you've got to serve him, you know? So the Tower of Babel was literally built to overthrow God. Like, they were building their own kingdom, and they were working their way up to heaven. And that was what they were attempting to do. So, you know, if you take that from the Israelites bringing that back, and that sets up a whole new thing, which we're getting ready to get into, because I'm going to share a couple stories with you that will show you how you absolutely are not only not supposed to bend your knee to foreign governments or other gods, but it's absolutely forbid. And in today's churches, they teach that you're absolutely supposed to. And that's why you see the flag of the United States flying over top of the Christian flag at these churches. It shows who owns that church. The reason it's important to understand this from a biblical perspective for me is because the Creator is the lawgiver. But even from a geopolitical standpoint nowadays, you have a tremendous amount of issues coming out of the Middle East with Israel, the United States, treaties, even flags. You know, there's a deception going on that's so deep that it's just almost unimaginable to think that we have been tricked that much, you know, because, you know, we're all pretty smart people, and we're pretty perceptive and honorable. We try to work and take care of our families and stuff, but, you know, over Israel right now, you have a flag flying that literally is this, I always mispronounce it, but it's the Star Rephaim or whatever it is, but literally it's the hexagram that represents Saturn in Anglo-Saxon tongue, which is Satan or Satan. And, you know, he's talking about graven images. I mean, that's absolutely true, but what's a statue? A statue's a graven image. I mean, it's, you know, you look at the paper and you see this statue. It's literally written in dog Latin to a dead fiction, you know, or a person, which is, you know, the Bible says that God's not a respecter of persons. He created man. And it also says in the latter days that man shall be a lover of death rather than a lover of life. But if you think about that from one perspective, you could say because people are following mammon or money or Baal worship, and they're the lover of that, they're willing to sacrifice the man position to be in the position of a person, which is absolute death. And it leads to debt, and it leads to guilt, and it leads to idol worship, and it's all those things that you think is some other kind of thing that it must mean, like if you're a mafia guy and you kill people and you've got a lot of money. I mean, it doesn't mean that. I mean, it's a system that has been designed around us to deceive us. I mean, it says in the Bible, he deceives the whole world. I mean, that's pretty significant because we're in that world, you know, and it's like You mean to tell me, all of us have woken up at different levels, at different times in our lives. Some people when they're 12, some people when they're 40, some people when they're 72. But just think about where you're at, and I'm sure everybody can feel what I'm getting ready to say. Think of how many times you've tried to carry on a conversation with somebody and tell them some of this information, and they look at you, and then drool starts to come out of the side of their mouth, and they just glaze over, and they'd rather talk about football, the lottery number. Did you hear about that guy on The Voice who won? What a great singer he is. But they're almost completely uninterested in all this truth that you're just slaving over on a computer or in a book, and you're spending all this time trying to figure this stuff out. And it's like they just don't even get it. It's because they think the system that they have, that they're under, that's a real world, but it's really an artificial overlay. It is not. Legal is not law. Legal is literally the undoing of the Creator's law. There's a movie called The Devil's Advocate, and I don't know if everybody's seen it or not, but if there's no movie that I'm aware of that's a better depiction of what Lucifer's like. And it's funny that the character they use in that movie is the owner of one of the world's largest law firms, and he says we're gonna create a mess, out of the legal system that's so the stench is gonna stink so high that it reaches heaven and chokes the whole lot of them. Well, that sounds just like the Tower of Babel. They're trying to build a system, and a lot of the players they don't realize it's just like people in any organization. You have people that are privates, and then you have people that are generals, and then you have kings. And those people all possess information and understanding at different varying levels of that society. So they don't all know they're doing evil, but you have to think, when you're doing something wrong, when you're getting over on somebody, or when you're capitalizing. On someone, I have to think that these people understand that just fine. A lot of them, they may not see the big picture, but they definitely know at the moment that they're doing somebody wrong. So, the Bible also says to come out of Babylon, and it calls it a great mystery and a whore and a harlot. And it's like, okay, so if Jesus is cursing the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes, and he calls them lawyers, because first he says, woe unto you lawyers, you scribes, you Pharisees. And everybody all of a sudden thinks that's just talking about a high priest. Well, it is. But it's also talking about the Sanhedrin, and it's talking about basically the leaders of that religious organization had blasphemed it literally by following false idols and worship, by bringing this mercantile system, this legal system of Babylon back to the temple, and they desecrated the temple. Okay, well, in the book of Revelations, it talks about how that great city, Babylon, falls in an hour. Like, it literally just, boom, it's going to fall. And it's interesting who it says mourns that. It says the merchants of the world mourn. So we know it's commerce or admiralty jurisdiction. So it's kind of interesting. If you go into Black's Law, JC, would you look this up can you do that while I'm talking? Can you look definition of church up in Black's Law?
Yeah, I mean, I know that you have the book. I will try and find it online.
Oh, here. Okay. Yeah, I forgot I got the book right down here. I thought it was upstairs.
Yeah, do you want to get it out of the book? Because I like the book the most.
Yeah, it'll take a second.
You want me to take over for a moment?
Yeah, take over for a second. 'Cause I really want to read them this definition, man. It's going to blow their minds.
Yeah, so one thing that the shaman was expounding on earlier was the Tower of Babel. And with the Tower of Babel and the fall of it, it even says, let us go down and give them Babel as a language. And the Babel is basically to babble your mind. And if you look at the English alphabet or the Western alphabet, it's written from left to right. And if you can understand the roots of Latin, you will much better understand almost every single European language.
Yes.
Now, the reason that's written from left to right when all ancient transcripts are written from right to left is because when you actually write from left to right, you use your right hand instead of your left hand, which activates a different part of your brain. And that's why Western civilizations made extreme advances in mathematics and mechanics and engineering and things that operate from the right side of the brain. Whereas all the other cultures around the world, they were still thinking with the left side of their brain, which is more spiritual. They were still connected to the world around them. And that's something that we don't really see today.
Yeah, you see more and more godlessness. I mean, the West, especially in the West, but you look at the United States, and you even bring up religion, and people just get pissed at you. I mean, it's like, oh, gosh, we got to hear this. But, guys, I mean, if you were put here by the Creator, isn't spiritualness pretty important? I mean, to just sidestep it seems to me, I mean, that's what the New World Order is. I mean, they're trying to literally replace God with humankind. They have human rights. They have humanity. Those are monsters. You look up the definition of a human being, it's a monster.
God never created a human.
No, he created man, and he created them from the dust of the earth. I've actually heard movies and other things that call mankind a virus on the earth. How obscene is that? Mankind is made of the earth. How could we possibly be a virus? But that's the kind of crap that you hear and you read and you see, and they're nothing special. And man, I think anybody who looks at a human being or a man on a scientific level, that's pretty remarkable. What I'm getting ready to read, I don't know, if anybody's ever looked this up before, but I'm going to read you something. It's going to go back to what JC was saying about the church and why what we're talking about is completely different. Look, guys, this is really the secret right here, okay? If you don't understand legalese, because it's a different language, and it is, and you didn't write the Constitution, and it's a caponym on the capital P, which makes it a proper noun, which means you have nothing to do with the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, the Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Territorial Governance Act, Magna Carta, the Hague Act, none of these things matter. International law, yada, 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 yada. That's stuff for them, okay? So if you can't serve two masters, and, when the disciples went to Christ, they said, hey, tell us how we should pray. He said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. That was the first thing he said, right? That's pretty interesting. Wow, his kingdom. Now, here's another thing. This will rub people, but here's the reality of it. When the rich young ruler came to Christ and said, hey, master, good master, what must I do to inherit the kingdom of God or eternal life? How do I get to heaven? Christ didn't say, well, if you just accept me into your heart as your Lord and Savior, then it'll be cool. He looked him dead in his eye and said, follow the law. And this is the key point, really, out of everything I've said tonight, this is the most important thing. If Christ is the Word, all life sprang from the sound of God's voice, and Christ being the Word means he is the lawgiver or the law. He takes that law and writes it on your heart. How in the world can you be follower of Christ or saved and then say it's not works of the law that you are saved? They are one and the same. Faith without works, in the book of James says, faith without works is dead, O vain man. It's like, man, they are like one and the same. It's like saying that Yahweh and Jesus are separate, and they're the same guy. It's just Jesus is a personification of God because God's too holy for us to see. But listen to this definition of church, man. This is their definition, not ours, but this is theirs. But I think it sums it up pretty well.
I agree with it 100%.
Yeah. I mean, this is great, guy. Like, really pay attention to this, because now you're going to see what the deal is. Definition of church, Black's Law, 6th edition is what I have here. In the most general sense, a religious society founded and established by Jesus Christ to receive, preserve, propagate his doctrines and ordinances. It may also mean a body of communicants gathered into a church-ordered body of community Christians united under one form of government by the profession of the same faith and observance of the same rituals and ceremonies. Did you hear that? They consider the true church a government, its own kingdom. I have heard guru after guru after guru say, oh, don't go in there with that religious mumbo-jumbo. Don't put that in your... Oh, it's silly. That's silly. Let me tell you something, guys. I fought one heck of a fight. I mean, dude, it was serious. My life was on the line, literally everything I ever worked for. I don't wish to go into the exact particulars of it. It was a federal issue. I will at some point. But I will tell you right now, what I told the prosecutor was, I'm not of your kingdom. I am of this kingdom of heaven over here. I'm not at war with you. I'm not trying to overthrow you. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm not a citizen of your kingdom. I'm a citizen of this one. I'm in trust with with the Creator, and I do not see a benefit of being in your kingdom at this time. I wish to be let alone. And obviously, there's a little bit more than that to it, but essentially, that was my stand. I never cool with it. Told me to have a good, happy Father's Day, and they let me alone. Closed the case. Now, that's because it was true. It was really in my heart. Like, that's who I am, you know? And they see that. They see that truth. They know if you come in there and you got something off the internet or somebody's doing your paperwork for you. And, I mean, just like you guys can tell somebody who's a fraud in certain things, they can see who's really something. You know what I mean? Go ahead, JC. It sounded like you wanted to say something.
There was a call earlier. It was either this week or last week. But a man was talking about nationalism. And the shaman and I were talking to him, and we basically said, when you enter the kingdom of heaven, there is no nationalism. The world of nations is only of this world. It's only in this world. When you enter the nation of heaven, there's no other nation to be found. It's not there. They don't exist.
You know, everybody's wanting to figure out, how do we get out from underneath the jurisdiction of these people? You know, and I hear this a lot too. They force it. They force it on us. They're forcing us. They make us do this and they make us do that. Look, we understand it's thick. We understand that it can be scary, and it is. I ain't gonna lie. I was really, really nervous when I went to the first hearing on that. It was not a pleasant experience. But let's face it, nobody came from the government, put a gun to your head and said, go get a driver's license or a social security number. They didn't force your mother and father to go get a birth certificate. Everything's an offer, counter offer. In their world, it's just business. It's not personal. So everything they've ever done is always an offer. They never said you have to have that number or mark, the trademark of the social security number. It's just everybody kind of teaches each other that that's what they have to do. And if you use that, you know, that's what we're trying to get across to some people who are struggling with the personhood. You know, person is just a vehicle. Here's an analogy. I may not do as good as I did the other day with my mom on the phone, but Santa Claus. I can say Santa Claus and everybody on the phone knew who Santa Claus is, what he looks like, how he dresses. Everybody has an image of what he drives, where he lives. Man, you could ask kids, is Santa Claus real? They'll tell you, yeah. Some kids will fight you to prove that Santa Claus is real. There are movies about him, coloring books, books written, TV specials about it. There's movies, remakes of movies. They put millions and millions and billions of dollars into this Santa Claus guy who is not real. But like if somebody came here from another planet and they saw that, they would swear Santa Claus was real. So what they've done is they've kind of pounded that into everybody's head all these years, using their legal system to brainwash everybody. You know, they're just plugging away, and you swear that name's real and that language is real, and that, you know, you have to read this book and this is how you have to act, and, you know, because they're you know, they got a list and they're checking it twice, man. And when in reality, you've been given the answer a long time ago. The answer is not to try to overthrow Babylon. That's not what your job is. Your job isn't to tell those people what they must do any more than their job is to tell you what you must do. You know, when we first got with y'all, when we decided to do this, we said we're just going to offer you cheesecake. You know, they're eating Twinkies or whatever, and we're offering cheesecake. We're not going to tell everybody Twinkies are wrong, even if we might think they are. We're just going to do something different. So the church was always designed really to be a safe haven for people. And if you think about it, even in movies or in reality, it's the sanctuary of the church. If you go into a church, technically you've entered holy ground sanctuary. I mean, I'm pretty sure that that's what the Continental and the John Wick thing is supposed to represent, even though they use the god Shiva in it. But God is a separate kingdom. Yeah.
What about Noriega?
Yeah, I was getting ready to use that. Like, Noriega ran into the church when the United States went down there to arrest him, and they would not enter the church and arrest him because they didn't have jurisdiction. You know, that's why the Vatican has its own jurisdiction. But, you know, the Vatican is not the church. Christ is the church. And the people that are in Christ and Christ is in them, that's the church. And the temple is the body, which is the earth, right, where you live. And this is kind of interesting. Gus told me that I should present it like this. Think of it like this. Like, the Creator makes the spirit, okay, the soul, and he takes that soul and it's you. And he entrusts you with the temple that he puts you in, the body. Okay, so when you die, you're accountable for what you did in that body, but it's a trust, right? So now, let's say you get married, and this is important to remember. So let's say you get married, and you don't need marriage licenses and all that jive. You get married, now you have a soul and a soul who are in trust with the bodies they have, who then form a trust with one another. So you really have, 3 trusts going on each way? So now think about that. So what happens when somebody, if you do no wrong, this is contingent on doing no wrong to your fellow man, what happens when they take your husband or your wife from you? Did they not just trespass on a private trust? So what if you have that trust recorded somewhere? You see, it's building your own kingdom. Like, you can't trespass on property of the government, or you can't just go take a truck or a tank, but can they come just take your property either? So it's like a trust. You're building this whole trust system, man. It's like, it's a layer of protection. All these things that the more law we learn, right, and the more we learn where it came from, the more we realize, and I understand that there's a lot of other factors in this, and that some things come from other than Judeo-Christian. I'm not ignorant of that fact, and I don't think the Bible is inerrant either. So I don't mean to suggest that. But, I mean, I think everybody knows we're born with certain things. Like, if you smile, you can smile anywhere, and everybody knows that means you're friendly. So there's just certain things that have nothing to do with what man invents, but everything to do with what the Creator creates. But we have to get in my opinion, on common ground, because, man, there's a lot of different stuff out there, and it's hurting people left and right. And the problem is people quit listening to one another. And we've got to, the only way I know to do it is to get on common ground and then help one another so that we can witness things and then help each other when it comes time to move a common law action. Now you have witnesses who can testify with firsthand knowledge. DC?
Yeah.
Do you have anything you wanted to say about that?
Not necessarily about that, but on one of the first calls, they were talking about form of government. And at some point in time, I said, I basically don't care what form of government people operate on, but the shaman and I, we've studied this structure for a really long time. So, everybody knows the difference between a common law court and a civil law court, and common law legal structure and a civil law legal structure. But both of those legal structures are governed by ecclesiastical law. So even if you were in France, if you go in to a civil law court and you jump up with your thought process, who you are, your beliefs, and your understanding, then you can hit the ecclesiastical court. And the highest law is the law of the Creator.
I mean, that's why they used to have you swearing on a Bible when you come in. I mean, that's kind of a clue that here you come into the District Court of the United States, and then they grab a Bible and have you swear by it, which you're not technically supposed to do, but that tells you what the highest law in the room is.
And that could be why they had the birth certificates, too, because remember how you said it just now, they used to put it in the Bible to keep track of the names?
So absolutely.
The state basically took over that common law function. That's directly out of the common law.
Yeah, you see how everything's a usurpation? It's like what they do is that they offer you a little bit, okay, Satan in the garden, right? Like, hey, you're not going to die. Come on. Did he really say that? Look, I can give you some killer knowledge, man. Like, all right, so, boom, mankind's on a rocket ship ride. And then what's ironic is when Cain killed Abel, he received a mark, and it's debatable what that mark is. It could be red hair. It could have been blue eyes. But one thing that is kind of interesting, what is always associated with evil? Cain, Lucifer, and punishment or destruction. City-states. Ever notice that? Sodom, Babylon, Gomorrah. I mean, it's always all these city-states. So in other words, it's representative of government. Like, here's a really interesting story. It'll show you exactly how bad it is. So the Israelites they're enslaved in Egypt. Now, we always have this image that they're getting hit with whips and, they're being starved to death and beaten. But that really was not how it was. They were a highly skilled workforce that had moved there a long time ago. And they were literally working and being protected by the Pharaoh, right? And they were taxed. And they were considered slaves by God because here they were under the authority of another king, and him being a jealous God, he doesn't share his throne with anyone. It's a long story, but essentially they were taxed at about a 21 to 22% tax rate, and that can be discovered through historical documents. And Moses' real name was Tutmosis. He was actually supposed to take over as the Pharaoh, but there was some issues, and they allude to that in that new movie they made with what's his name who played Batman, of trickery, how the Pharaoh really wanted him to be the Pharaoh when he died, Ramses. So anyway, Moses gets them out of Egypt, and they're on their way, right? So they've been under this Pharaoh for a long time, and they're going through the desert, and they're just complaining, man. They're like, oh my gosh, Moses, do you even know where we're going to get water and food? He says, look, don't sweat it. God's going to provide everything you need, man. Just trust him. You look up there in the sky. He's leading you by a cloud, or he's leading you by fire. Let's just hush. Let's go. And he feeds them with the manna, right? He's doing all these cool things, and all they're doing is complaining. Well, Moses goes up